So there's been a lot of talk, I think, about Daniel Jones and how much money is Daniel Jones really worth? How valuable of a player is Daniel Jones? And I have some thoughts of my own, so let's get into what those are. The reality is, when I go back and watch most of Daniel Jones's best games, they typically are when he's in a pretty good situation, which is interesting because I don't look at this offense and think that they have a ton of talent. They don't. I mean, the receiving core was a mess last year, quite frankly, and while there's some good offensive linemen, Evan Neal played like a raw rookie, as you might have expected last year, so there were some issues, but like the Minnesota game was a great example of probably his best game, and also a game where really Minnesota beat themselves pretty constantly. I'm not just going to use the Minnesota game to talk about this. We'll get into some numbers and a lot of stuff in just a second. But just, starting off here, you see that there is going to be a one-on-one matchup with a slant route over the middle. Okay, pretty good situation right here. But really, Minnesota just screws something up here. I'm not sure exactly what they thought was happening. But look, as you see right when this play begins, I mean, you see that the guy who's supposed to be covering your wide open receiver is not. He has his hands out saying, hey, what's going on? Either he thought it was a different coverage, like zone or something, or he thought there was a switch coming. I don't know exactly what happened, but the reality is, Daniel Jones, hey, doing the right thing. When your opponent makes a mistake, capitalize on it. There's no shame in that. That's what good teams do. That's what good quarterbacks do, is take advantage of their opponent's mistakes. Jones does exactly that, and they are able to pick up a nice little chunk play right there. So, okay, hey, you gained some yards on that one. It's, that's the goal, right? To move the ball down the field. How much credit do you give Jones for it when it was just a blown coverage? Some. He noticed it, but you don't give him a ton of credit, right? It's not a superstar level play. It is a solid play. And that's, I think, fair to say in that Vikings game. Most of what he did was he did his job, which is, again, you pay a lot of money for that in the NFL. It's not easy to get quarterbacks who can consistently do their job. Like, this play is going to be another example of it, where what's going to happen here is it's going to be a zone coverage play once again, and you see how this can work, where your receiver who's running a deeper route towards the bottom of the screen is going to push Minnesota players further deep. Then you have another one going from the offense's left to the offense's right. Hopefully no one picks him up and he can get open. As you see, Jones is going to look like there's supposed to be a play action, but wasn't. But anyway, when he finally makes the throw, it's wide open. There was, the play worked out exactly as intended right there, and you're able to get an easy chunk play. Do I hold this against Jones? No. Again, he's running the offense the way he should. We all go crazy over Brock Purdy and how he was able to do this. Well, Jones did it just as well. For sure, that this was, he was able to run the offense, I think, effectively this season. To me, I do think when I watch tape, I'm more often impressed with the coaching staff than with the quarterback. I'm very much more often impressed with the play calling and things of that nature than with Daniel Jones's playmaking as a player. In fact, let's look at some numbers. I made a couple of charts that I think could help, kind of talk in more detail about how I feel about Daniel Jones as a player. So first, we're going to this chart. There's several different stats here. 41 eligible quarterbacks for each of these stats. That's worth noting. But for PFF grade, he was 17th ranked. And passer rating, he was 16th ranked out of the eligible quarterbacks. These both, I think, is fair, right? He was a solid quarterback last year. He wasn't a star quarterback by any means, but he was solid. The turnover-worthy play percentage, that's what TWP percentage means, was 18th best in football. So again, kind of right where you expect him to be, given where he's at, which is a fringe top half of the league starting quarterback. I would say in the top half of the league starting quarterbacks, but not like significantly there is where I would put him. The one of the notable stats here on this list, though, is going to be big time throw percentage. This was 40th in the NFL out of 41 eligible quarterbacks. He did not get splash plays. He just didn't. That's just not something that happened. Also, ADOT, average depth of target, was fourth lowest, was the thing. I probably should have done highest there. It kind of confuses the graph a little bit, but fourth lowest average depth of target on the year. So he did not throw the ball down the field hardly at all, and he did not get splash plays, partially because he's not throwing the ball down the field a lot. So part of that is he doesn't get the opportunities to make those splash plays and to make those highlight reel level throws, but he also, does get some opportunities and was not getting them, was not hitting them for whatever reason. Is that his fault? Is that the receiver's fault? It's certainly partially the receiver's fault and partially just the decision making of what they decided to do and how they ran their offense and things of that nature. But I don't think it'd be totally fair to pretend like none of it is his fault as well, when out of the 41 eligible quarterbacks, only one had less big-time throws than he did. The flip side, though, is adjusted completion percentage. This was best in football. He had the best adjusted completion percentage in the NFL, and that feels awesome. So just just to explain the stat, adjusted completion percentage is its completion percentage, but then they go through and they look at, okay, were there drops, drop passes, were there, throwaways. They account for that stuff. So it's completion percentage, basically your earned completion percentage. However, it is worth noting these still have the same flaws some of the same flaws that regular completion percentage has. It can be very scheme dependent, and if you don't throw the ball very far down the field, which Daniel Jones does not, well, then it kind of makes some sense that you're going to have a higher adjusted completion percentage. However, again, that explains why it's high. It doesn't explain why it's first, and he deserves credit for it being first. I think that's reasonable to say. The other stat that's worth noting is TTT, that is time to throw 36. So what 36 means is that it takes him the 36 longest to throw the football. He holds on to the ball for a while, so that's just something worth noting. I don't know if it's a positive, I don't know if it's a negative, but it is weird that for someone who doesn't throw the ball very far down the field, he also holds on to the ball for a while. Although, you could come up with an explanation if you're a pro Daniel Jones guy, which is he looks down the field a lot, sees that nothing's open, and then is forced to take a check down. So that makes the time to throw higher, but also the average depth of target lower. That makes sense to me. But again, is that the only reason? And that's kind of what I keep going back to some of these stats is, I'm giving my opinion on what my reading of it, but I also always have to say, well, is that the only reason? And probably not. There's probably a bit more to it than just that. This stat is this chart, I should say, is another interesting one for me. This is, how he performs in specific stats, in specific depths down the field in specific stats. So, for example, the top row, just so you know how to read this chart, top row is 20-plus yards down the field. His PFF grade was 17th best in football. His passer rating was actually 6th best in football. But percentage, that's not the actual percentage of throws that were that far. That's where he ranked in percentage of throws that far. So they barely threw the ball 20-plus yards down the field. 35th most out of 36 eligible quarterbacks. That's what that last row is, all the way towards the right, is, out of how many eligible quarterbacks, because it's a little different per each category. So only one quarterback threw the ball 20 yards down the field less than Jones did. But when he did, he was effective. And you do have to wonder, is that correlated in some way? Is the fact that he was effective there partially because he rarely threw there, so he picked his spots well? I would assume yes. The 10 to 19 range, though, he was nowhere near as effective. Interestingly enough, PFF graded him at about the same, but it was more so just the team itself was not as effective. They did it a bit more, so maybe that's why, is because they were more often throwing there. They didn't quite have the element of surprise that they do 20-plus yards down the field, because 30th passer rating, which again, passer rating is a team stat, whereas PFF is individual player stats. So it makes sense that there could be a difference there. But also, the checkdowns, the underneath stuff, it's not just checkdowns 0 to 9 yards. In fact, a lot of these, majority of these are still designed plays, and he was at his best when he was throwing there. There's no getting around it. That's where he thrived, and that's what they typically did. I mean, he was 9th best PFF grade, 4th best passer rating there, and they did it the 3rd most in football out of 35 eligible quarterbacks there. This is what the Giants did. The Giants threw the ball shallow consistently and had success doing it. This is, to me, a scheme thing. They were able to utilize their talent to the best of their abilities, and they deserve a ton of credit for that. But I just have to say, maybe this is me being too negative, but giving someone like this, a massive contract is a mistake, because he is still someone you have to scheme to his strengths. I give the Giants a ton of credit for scheming to his strengths, but at the end of the day, if a team is able to take away the underneath stuff and force him to throw down the field, do we get a Mitchell Trubisky situation? It's certainly possible. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just concerned that it could. And because of that, I would definitely franchise tag him before I'd give him a big deal, at least want to see a little bit more out of it. But there's also the counter argument to that, which is he's still getting better. He's not a finished product just yet. He was in a tough situation really for all of his career, including last season. He had a good coaching staff last year, but I still wouldn't call it a great situation. In a couple months, he turns 26, so he still is definitely someone who is on the young side and can continue to grow. But to me, if you are giving him a big deal, you're giving it based on what you think he could be and not what you think he is today. That's just how I see it. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.